Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the life of François-Marie Arouet,
Hmm.
though you probably know him better as Voltaire.
Right, the famous name.
Exactly. And our mission here is to kind of look beyond that common idea of him as just a philosopher. We want to uncover, the real breadth of his genius.
Yeah.
We've been digging into this really great article. It's called Voltaire, Beyond the Philosopher, Poet, Playwright, and Provocateur. It gives such a rich, multidimensional view of his life and work.
What's so interesting, like you said, is that this source isn't, well, it's not just a straightforward biography. It's more of a celebration, really, an analysis
Yeah.
of his incredibly diverse literary side.
I-
You should get ready for some real aha moments, I think.
Yeah.
Because it paints him as this true polymath, strategic thinker, and honestly, probably one of the Enlightenment's absolute boldest and most versatile voices.
Okay, well, let's unpack that then, because when most people hear Voltaire, the first thing that pops into their head is Enlightenment philosopher.
Standard association.
But this article, it really paints a much bigger picture, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, he was obviously a key philosopher, no doubt about that. But the article really hammers home that if you only see him that way, you're missing a huge amount.
Right.
He was genuinely a polymath, master of so many different forms, a poet, a playwright, historian, satirist, just the embodiment, really, of that bold Enlightenment spirit.
So much more than just philosophy.
Exactly. And the sheer volume, I mean, the amount and the diversity of what he produced is just staggering. We're talking like over 50 plays.
50.
Yeah, 50 theatrical works,
Yeah.
plus epic poetry, incredibly biting satire. And get this, over 20,000 letters.
20,000 letters.
And every single one is like a little master class in language,
Yeah.
full of that wit and philosophical thinking.
That's the bit that really jumped out at me, too. The scale. Over 50 plays, all those letters. It makes you realize just how fundamental his skill with different literary forms was to, well, everything he did. What about his poetry, for instance? What really stands out to you there?
Well, his connection to poetry was clearly very deep. He actually called it the music of the soul.
Huh. Nice phrase.
Yeah. But for Voltaire, it wasn't just about, beauty or self-expression. He actually used it like a tool of resistance.
How so?
Think of it like a scalpel in a velvet glove. That's a good way to put it. It was elegant, witty, sure, but underneath, razor-sharp critique.
So this wasn't just him thinking abstract thoughts and writing them down prettily.
No, not at all.
Did this biting poetry actually, affect his own life? Did it have real-world impact?
Oh, absolutely. Very real and often very personal consequences. His poems weren't just criticism. They were acts of defiance, really.
Like what? Any examples?
Well, the famous one is when he wrote this satirical poem, and in it, he allegedly accused Regent Philip of incest.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, that wasn't just scandalous talk. It was a deliberate poke in the eye,
Right.
and it landed him straight in the Bastille.
The Bastille. For writing a poem.
Yep. For Voltaire, words weren't just ideas floating around. They were powerful. They were dangerous weapons, and using them came with real risks, often risking his own freedom.
So he saw poetry as this sophisticated way to expose hypocrisy in government, the church.
Exactly. A powerful, sophisticated weapon hitting right at the heart of power structures.
Okay, so given how effective and maybe dangerous his poetry was, it's fascinating that he also jumped into another really powerful medium, the stage. Theater. How did that go for him?
Well, his theater career started off incredibly strong. His debut in 1718, a play called Oedipus.
Like the Greek myth.
Yeah, based on it. It was a massive success. Not just popular, it was kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It blended that classical structure with this new psychological depth that really grabbed audiences.
Because what are we talking?
It ran for 45 consecutive performances.
Wow, 45 nights straight back then. That's huge.
It was remarkable for the time.
Yeah.
It pretty much cemented his reputation in Paris literary circles almost overnight. Gave him money, credibility, the whole package.
And then came La Henriade, right? His big, epic poem celebrating Henry IV and religious tolerance.
Yes, that was a major work.
And people were comparing it to Homer, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. That's high praise.
Extremely high praise. And La Henriade wasn't just an epic poem. It was a really profound political statement, too.
How so?
Well, by celebrating Henry IV, the king who ended the wars of religion with the Edict of Nantes-Voltaire was making a strong case, maybe subtly but powerfully, for religious tolerance and for a strong monarchy that valued peace over religious dogma.
Ah, okay. Context is everything.
Definitely. In France, at that time, still dealing with all those religious tensions, it hit home. People saw it as a kind of modern epic, genuinely worthy of those classical comparisons.
But it sounds like not everything he put on stage was met with applause. Did he have stuff that caused maybe extreme reaction? Backlash, even?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Take La Pucelle d'Orléans.
Joan of Arc.
Yep. His take on Joan of Arc. Except it was, well, brutally satirical, so provocative, so disrespectful, really, in how it treated this huge national and religious icon.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Got banned, publicly burned in several countries.
Burned. Wow.
Talk about igniting fury. It really makes you wonder, what kind of art today would provoke that level of censorship and outrage?
Yeah, good question. And he also had his share of flops too, right? And fugues.
Yeah.
I read about Artemir being a disaster.
It was a miserable failure, apparently. But he bounced back pretty quickly with another play, Mariamne.
Ah, okay. Quick recovery.
Right. And actually, speaking of Mariamne, there's this fascinating little story connected to its premiere.
Oh, yeah.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the other giant of the Enlightenment, he was apparently there at the premiere.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he absolutely hated it, loathed the play.
Wow. Awkward.
Very. And people often point to that moment as the spark, the thing that kicked off this lifelong feud between Voltaire and Rousseau.
Huh. Just from hating a play.
Well, probably more complex than that, but it was a trigger. And it does raise this really interesting question, doesn't it? Like, how much do these personal things, disagreements, rivalries, maybe even just bad first impressions, how much do they actually shape intellectual history? The whole course of ideas.
That is a fascinating thought. Makes you wonder how different things might have been without that bad blood.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of clashes, that lifelong tension with Rousseau brings us to another kind of clash, a philosophical one, triggered by literally an earthquake, the 1755 Lisbon disaster. That really hit Voltaire hard, didn't it?
Oh, profoundly. It was a huge turning point for him philosophically. He responded almost immediately with this incredibly haunting philosophical poem.
Right.
And it basically just blew up the whole idea of divine justice, of a perfectly ordered, benevolent universe run by God. He asked these devastatingly simple yet profound questions, like why? Why would innocent children die in something like this? Why Lisbon, which was seen as a pretty devout city, why there and not, as he put it, morally questionable cities like Paris or London?
Ouch. Okay.
Yeah. And fundamentally, if God created this world, why make it subject to such random, horrific suffering and destruction? It shook his faith in that kind of optimistic deism.
And this is where he really clashed with Rousseau's view again, right? How did Rousseau see the earthquake?
Totally differently. Rousseau basically said, look, it's not God's fault, it's our fault. Humans are responsible for the scale of the disaster because we choose to cram ourselves into cities built in risky places.
So nature isn't evil, but our choices make us vulnerable.
Exactly. Nature just does what it does. Human choices amplify the danger and the suffering. So this whole debate, it just perfectly highlights these two kind of conflicting Enlightenment worldviews.
Which are?
One is rooted in this deep cosmic skepticism, questioning the whole divine plan.
Yep.
And the other is focused much more on human agency, social responsibility, our choices.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture.
Right. These fundamental arguments about fate, free will, why there's suffering, what our responsibility is, they're still shaping how we understand ourselves and our place in the world today, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's clear that Voltaire's boldness, his satire, it constantly put him in trouble with the authorities, forced him into exile sometimes, you mentioned. What were the actual stakes for him when he published these controversial works?
The stakes were incredibly high. Often it was literally his freedom, maybe even his life on the line. Take Le Mondaine, for example.
What was that one about?
It was basically a poem defending pleasure, materialism, worldly joys.
Yeah.
In enjoying life now.
Okay.
Which was a direct rejection of Christian asceticism, the idea that this life is just sort of waiting to the next one and you should deny yourself pleasure.
They don't enjoy things too much.
Exactly. And Voltaire's open embrace of living in the present, enjoying luxury, was so scandalous, such a direct hit against the prevailing religious morals, that he actually had to pack up and flee to Brussels to avoid being arrested.
Wow. Just for saying it's okay to enjoy life.
Pretty much. He was constantly risking everything for his ideas.
And then there was Azalan, another poem, you said, critiquing religious morality again.
Yeah, another narrative poem. It told the story of this really devout religious man who finds himself turned between, well, lust and love, piety and desire.
Ah, the classic dilemma.
Right. And what does a work like that tell us? It just shows his relentless drive to pick apart hypocrisy and dogma wherever he saw it. He wasn't afraid to use any literary tool, even an intimate human story like this, to challenge the status quo.
So through Aslan, he's using this personal struggle to expose the kind of rigid and maybe contradictory rules of religious authority.
Precisely. Inviting readers to question the very basis of their own moral codes. He was always pushing, always challenging, even if it meant packing his bags again.
So moving towards his later years, his life changed pace a bit, didn't it? Especially after he moved in 1755.
Yes, that's right. In 1755, he bought an estate near Geneva called Les Délices, the Delights. He settled there with his niece, Madame Marie-Louise Denis.
Les Délices. Nice name for a home.
Isn't it? And it wasn't just a place to retire, it really became this vibrant hub, a kind of creative laboratory for him. He kept writing prolifically there.
And that's where he wrote Mahomet, the play condemning religious extremism.
Yes, among other things. And you know what's such a compelling detail about him? He loved the theater so much, the stage itself, that he would actually perform in his own plays, take on roles himself.
No way. He acted in them too.
He did. It just shows how passionate he was about the whole theatrical experience, not just the writing.
That's fantastic. And his final work was a play too, wasn't it? Irene.
That's right. His very last work, Irene, debuted in Paris in 1778. And there's this really touching story about it.
Yeah.
He was extremely frail by then, obviously very old. But he made the effort to attend the 6th performance of the play.
Must have taken a lot out of him.
Immense effort, surely. And the audience, seeing him there, they just erupted, rose in this massive standing ovation, recognizing everything he'd contributed.
Oh.
And apparently he was visibly moved, tears in his eyes, especially when the actors on stage brought out a laurel wreath and crowned a bust of him.
Oh, that's quite a scene. A final public triumph.
A really fitting farewell, you could say. Acknowledgement of his genius right at the end.
And then he passed away just, what, 2 months later?
About 2 months later, yes. Leaving behind this just incredible legacy woven right into the fabric of literature, philosophy, history.
His relevance really does endure, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Voltaire is still such a towering figure because his life and work just embody that courage you need to question dogma. You know, he shows the real power art has to challenge authority. And he captures that timeless tension between reason and belief and human suffering.
Yeah.
His sheer range, the versatility across genres, the philosophical punches he threw, that relentless passion he had for truth and justice. It makes his legacy feel just as vital, just as necessary today as it ever was. He really was a force of nature.
What an incredible journey, really digging into Voltaire's life, so much more complex and, well, multifaceted than just the philosopher.
Definitely. And, you know, that kind of leads us perfectly into our final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Okay.
How does Voltaire's fearless questioning of divine justice after Lisbon, for instance, his championing of pleasure, his absolute belief in art's power to challenge power, how does all that resonate with the debates, the challenges we face in our world right now?
Good question.
And maybe think about this. What long-held beliefs, perhaps ones you take for granted, might you examine with Voltaire's own critical tool, that scalpel in a velvet glove?